I would like to introduce, our first keynote, and I have the pleasure of introducing Kavitha Gundurao, a veteran from the industry who has also been with Wipro and who is now with CGI, who is our long-term supporter. And she primarily looks after, she's as director of consulting practice at CGI. She continues to assist, and today here she is to present to us some of the interesting topics.
Yeah, I hope you're able to see my screen. And yeah, the topic that I want to talk about today is about quality engineering maturity assessment framework, right? Yeah, just before we begin on to the topic, let me just take you quickly on what is happening in the QA and the testing space, right? Most often, the QA and testing jobs are considered not so interesting, and it might be very easy. And most often, the QA budgets are also constrained, or it is actually being cut, right? And that's what typically happens. And we are hard pressed to deliver our testing artifacts, and also test execution has to be done within a short span of time and things like that. So let's look at what's really happening in the industry, and take a look at the Dilbert scenarios here. So the very first thing is, what's taking you so long on the project? That's what the manager asks. So the member here is talking about, yeah, the application is unstable because the data model is driven by an overly complex relational database and there was no integration testing done. So he's trying to explain the complexity, and well, what the manager thinks is, does any of that mean this, same thing as lazy? So that's what, typically the senior management thinks, that testing is pretty easy and we are not really looking into and putting all our efforts and thoughts in resolving the problems, right? If you look at another scenario, here the team is actually looking at and having a team meeting, and the manager is saying, I cut the quality control budget to free up funds to increase our sales force, right? Um, so the Dilbert says, so is your strategy to sell a larger volume of defective products? And there's a conversation going on. What they think is the quality is taken for granted. They say the quality will be fine. The test will just take longer time. So they say feel that the testing just takes a longer time, and it's just that it's an antique thing, and but quality will be just fine. It's just taken for granted. Okay. If you look at another scenario here, what's happening? The conversation here. So Dilbert says, you eliminated the budget for automated test software. How are we going to test our new code? So the manager says, go write some automated test software, you big baby. I already pay you. So it's just free. So he gets demotivated, and he thinks, today I learned, you can end any conversation by calling the other person a big baby, right? So that something happens, and most often we also would have encountered in our day-to-day lives that automated testing should be done free of cost, right? If you look at another scenario, there's again something going on about the performance testing. So Gilbert says to his manager, we added a new performance testing, but learned that the test itself is flawed. Okay. And again, there's a background conversation happening. They said, now our product fails at our own test, and our customers are asking to see the test results, right? So he asks, do I have the permission to fake the test data? And the manager is surprised or perplexed, and he says, I didn't even know that a data can be real, right? He's always been thinking that we just fake some of the test data and we do not really do performance testing on the real data. So these are certain conversations, or things that are going on in the QA and the testing space. And how do we really make things very interesting and ensure that we procure, or we have contained the budget, enough budgets within the testing, and ensure that we move on from QA to QE, right? So why QA to QE is essential? Okay, we all know that the most of the organizations are on their digital transformation journey with the adoption of agile, DevOps, and enterprise level CI/CD. Right, and there's been a focused approach with increased automation and shift left approach. And we also need to make sure that we test early and often, and test driven development and PDDs are some of the things that are getting adopted. okay, in the industry. And there is a lot of need to eliminate the redundancy and improve efficiency as well. So QE in a nutshell is a proactive and integrated approach that drives actually the development of very high quality products from start to finish. So to make QA interesting, I think we all need to adopt to quality engineering principles and processes, right? So, all said and done, now how do we embark on the quality engineering journey? Why quality engineering maturity assessment framework is required? Okay, we see that there's too much of information on quality engineering, but a step-by-step approach to QE is missing, right? There's lack of clarity on the processes, KPIs, and matrices, and changes required to implement QE. And we also see that lack of clarity in how to assess product quality and its maturity level, and lack of understanding of the expected outcomes from QE, right? So these are certain things that we felt that we need to be, focusing on, and that's why we felt that there is a need for a maturity assessment framework. Just let me take a Okay. Um, so, what's next? And so, how do we move on from QA to QE? Quality assurance and automation, quality assistance, and engineering mindset. So, this is how we have coined the QA to QE with the value proposition. So, right. Let's look at the customer journeys, what's happening with respect to quality engineering before we begin that. And if you look at the four different types of customer journeys, some might be, the maturity level might be low, and some might be in medium, some might be in high, and things like that. So look at the customer profile where they're looking for the first steps towards digital transformation. Already implemented new practices, Jenkins and test automation, and the maturity might be very low. So the customer need is he thinks that they need to measure the software quality in order to plan for future sprints and build a testing strategy. And we also need to manage risk of the releases and manage risk of application modernization programs. So what kind of offerings or value can we bring it onto the table? Okay, we need to focus on bringing on visibility across the entire pipeline that will guide the testing strategy, reduce the risk of release, and also reduce the modernization risk. Okay, so that's where we need to constantly make sure that we measure where they stand and then how we can improve on. So another customer journey could be the customer who have already migrated most of their legacy stack into the modern stack, right? The test automation in some pockets, but still experience low quality in production, and the maturity level might be medium or high. The customer needs to improve quality of their software products. That's a customer need. Okay, so what kind of values can we bring onto the table here? So we can look at reducing the production defects and escalations, and maintain a competitive advantage by improving the customer experience. And then moving on, maybe another customer is at a journey where they're just focusing on maintenance and governance, right? And they with a lot of compliance and governance in place. But the testing cycle must be slow and expensive, but will not comprise on software quality. The maturity level is high in quality and low in medium automation. Okay. Um, so the customer need here would be like reduce the cost of testing and also adopt risk-based testing, right? So what can we bring onto the table here? So we should focus more on reducing the cost of testing and risk reductions. So that's the kind of offering that we can bring in because they're already in, governance and maintenance is in place, right? And then another customer journey that we look at is the customer has already migrated most of their legacy stack into modernization stack and have hundreds and thousands of test cases to be automated along with the manual tests, right? The maturity in terms of quality engineering might be high. However, there might be very fast and frequent releases, and therefore, we need to speed up their overall testing cycle and deliver value to market faster. So optimizing and testing needs, testing cycles, and bringing in value to faster deliver the products is something that this customer might be looking in. Okay. So, what we thought is what are some of the key drivers to help accelerate our quality engineering journey, right? So, one of them is you need to focus on the customer experience and business objectives with efficiency and speed. We also focus on standardizing the use of end to end automation with automation first approach across all test stages. Okay, shifting not just from focus should not be just from the dev quality perspective, but we should also focus on improving the production quality, right? And adoption of AI, ML, and predictive analytics in testing would definitely bring in a lot of uh, useful insights and also kind of improve the efficiency, overall efficiency. Okay. And definitely, you have to focus on scalable and virtual test environments and test data management because these are certain things we often tend to do very good automation, and most of them are automated. But you tend to lose on having a scalable and virtual test environments in place, and also adopting parallel execution is something we should focus on. And last but not the least, what we should be focusing on having a strategy around quality initiatives where we could build POCs, demo the feasibility of any new point solutions, and quantify the potential outcomes to the end customer, right? So, what did we do overall? We came up with something called Quality Engineering Maturity Assessment Framework, wherein we had five different levels. Basically, we considered the QA expectations from each of the end users, and we put together a metrics or an assessment model as in the picture below, right? So we had typically we have only four levels, but what we did was we added another level, and that's the level zero, right? Where level zero is just the base, stage where we have seen many of them having limited automation and manual and ad hoc testing is being done with minimal, very minimal usage of tools, right? And level one is something where you focus on automation with shift left approach and not just at the regression testing, but you start focusing on unit testing, build sanity, regression, system testing, and so on, right? And also continuously focus on non-functional testing such as performance and security. So that's what comprises of what we have in level one. If you look at level two, it has we put across like the extensive tools leverage, such as the code quality measures. We're starting using of cast and sonar are actually instrumented with your source code, and then we get to see where do we stand with respect to the code quality, right? And establish continuous testing with CI/CD tools, integration with test management tool is something we thought we should be focusing on in the level two. Moving on to the level three, we started focusing on the test data management, improving the QA infrastructure, bringing on virtual environments, test coverage, and test optimization tools, right? So, this is something we started focusing on level three. And in level four, we felt the need that we should be doing an end to end lifecycle automation using AI/ML tools, hyper automation, and cognitive based, right? So, these are the levels that we have put together, and we started focusing on building reusable assets that can be made available at each of the levels for quicker implementation, such as we have our own unified automation frameworks which has been used across many of the projects, and we started building in the unit test tools list so that based on the technology stack what are the tools that are most relevant and how it could be broad based. We also started coming up with test management tool recommendations, the code to test coverage tools, such as one of the popular tools that we've been started using is CLights, and then DevOps tool sets and test data management tool sets as well. So we have a lot of in-house developed tools, or I would say point solutions, and we're also trying to see what are the, evaluating many other tools which are popular in the market as well. Okay. Now let's take a look at the six-step approach to maturity assessment framework. So the very first step I would suggest is that we need to have or establish the transition goals, the Q transition goals, right? That's one of the first steps that we need to be focusing when we want to transition to QE, right? Then identify and involve the key stakeholders for the quality maturity assessments. It could be your project managers, it could be test managers, it could be test or the QE directors, or it could be business analysts and product owners and so on. So basically, the complete, the fraternity or the leadership team is something we need to be involving them, and when we are trying to put up this maturity assessment framework. Okay. Then prepare the quality maturity assessment timelines, like each project or the product could be at one stage or some other stage or when whatever the levels, right? We need to ensure that how do we progress from one level to another level. So with respect to the projects, you need to prepare a timeline as well. You finalize all the pre-assessment preparations, and then you start actually conducting workshops and interviews and surveys to gather the information, at what stage or what level, what are the tools, what are the techniques, what are the processes that each project is at. And then based on the survey results, you kind of come up with the final steps for the quality maturity assessment. So these are some of the six-step approach that you need to be taking if you want to really, assess the projects with respect to the quality engineering processes. Okay. So what did we do at CGI? We put up a solution called Quality Engineering Maturity Assessment Framework, mainly, to showcase how our organization measures up against the industry best practices. We did look at TMMI, but we felt that it's a far-fetched model, but and not necessarily catered to quality engineering processes and principles. And that's where we felt that a custom framework is essential, right? Especially coming from a business unit, we have a lot of IPs. We call the products as IPs here. More than 70 IPs we have, and it has been in the customer deployments from a long time, and we have a lot of legacy and products that are undergoing modernization. And that's where we felt that when we are migrating from QA to QE, it is essential to have a custom built maturity assessment framework as well. Okay, so we started designing and defining a QA maturity assessment framework. As I mentioned already, a 5-level assessment model was derived, and then we started taking the steps like identifying the parameters that impact QE, defining maturity levels, added weightage to each of the parameters, and then the expected outcomes as well, which are defined with objective validation points, right? So, and also we developed an internal tool, a simple Excel based tool, and now that has been migrated to a web portal, wherein based on all of the parameters, the end user can attach, the percentages that in, let's say automation unit testing, what is a percentage, and let's say test coverage, what is the percentage, and test management tool integration, what is the percentage, and so on and so forth, with more of objective validation points, right? So that's how we came up with the tool. And the moment you enter all the values and you click on it, you kind of get a QE score, right? So the very first step that we did, we derived the QE baseline for all the IPs, right? We have more than 70 plus IPs, and we assessed all of them, and we came up with the baseline scores. And then the framework started acting as a guidance for further improvement. Like now, let's say most of them are in level 1, and then how do we migrate to the level 2, how do we progress to the level 2? So that became, the framework became a guidance, and the team started working towards putting up a progression plan. And they became more, it started motivating them, to inspiring them to move on to the next level. Okay. And we started actually putting up the plans for the flagship IPs initially, and then leveraging the best practices for what is being done and the reusable assets across the IPs. So this is something we started also, making sure that we have the reusable assets, and that's been leveraged across all the IPs, including the best practices sharings, right? So that's when we started tracking all the progress, and finally, we started every 6 months. We kind of come up with a reassessment of the quality engineering maturity as per the defined plans, have they met or not, and reporting it to the senior leadership on a monthly basis, validating the QE level outcomes with respect to the expected outcomes. So this is something we started. It's just not that we put up a maturity framework and people have done that. We've also collaborated with our business excellence team, and they started auditing the projects, and they've started coming up with the, validating the QE levels and making sure, whatever they have been projecting is, you know, right or not. Okay. Then finally, the measured outcomes, what we put together, we started defining the parameters and the levels along with the matrices and KPIs as indicated here, right? And at every level, we've seen how each of the IPs or the products have continuously improved their QE scores based on the outcome. And we've also felt that, at every stage and every level, we have defined these measured outcomes. For instance, in level one, we feel that, they should have more of improved productivity and reduce test execution efforts to be at greater than 30%. And we feel that the first pass rate of automation execution should be greater than 90%, and improved skill level for a member, in test automation should be greater than 50%. So on and so forth. So we started putting up these matrices and KPIs, and believe it or not, most of the IPs have improved their QE levels by meeting all of these. And if you look at some of the QE, the outcomes, for instance, the post-delivery defects should be reduced by 10%, and then you qualify to be in level two, and your build success rate should be greater than 90%, right? And if you look at in level three, the cost score should be greater than the TQI index should be greater than three, and your security score should be greater than three as well. And test optimization, like reduction in invalid defects, should be by 20%, right? So on and so forth. These are certain matrices and KPIs that we have defined, and ensure that, when you're auditing your QE levels, these have been taken care into consideration, and then validating these scores. All right. So let's look at what are our key accomplishments. With QMAF in place, we were able to baseline the QE scores, continuously improve the QE levels of all our IPs and products, and some of our products got upgraded to higher levels of QE maturity. Right? When we started off, most of them were in level zero or level one, and then 50% of our flagship IPs moved to level two from level zero within just 1 year. Okay. And we had very few projects in red, and right now it's completely zero projects in red and yellow for the IPs which are moved with the level one and above, right? So ease of onboarding new projects with this QA framework, it's very easy to do that. And for all our IPs with improved QE scores, what we've seen is the delivery defects have reduction in the post delivery defects is significant, right? And improved the delivery of the quality as such. We've seen improved productivity. We have seen a drastic improvement in our client satisfaction scores, and also the member satisfaction score. So in CGI, we kind of measure member satisfaction score as well. So that's something has also drastically improved, because the QA team is kind of challenged now and to do much more than what they were doing earlier. And they're doing a lot of interesting stuff, innovating things, and doing integration with a lot of tool sets, and also coming up with in-house developed tools, right? So while the framework is originally developed for the IPs or the products, it can also be well implemented for services too. And we are now taking this across CGI APAC, right? For other business units are also going to adopt this framework, and take it to the rest of the business units as well. Okay. So if you look at the QE progression results, as I mentioned earlier, okay, we have seen improved delivery quality, with the reduction in post-delivery defects. Like if you look at the baseline, the initial L0, we had 97% in L0, 3% in L1, and 0% in L2. That's the baseline when we started off. Post 6 months, we've seen a drastic improvement, and our L0 became 72%, and L1 is improved quite a bit, and it was in 25% of our IPs were in L1, and in L2 we had about 3%. Now, post 9 months, the L0 came down a bit. L1 went up to 12%, but you could see that L2 levels, IPs who were in L2 went up to 21%. And post 1 year, we have seen again a drastic change in L1 and L2 as well. 65% in L0, 14% in L1, and 23% in L2. So, as I said, we've been improving continuously, and as we end this year, we are going to definitely do a reassessment and see. I'm sure some of the most flagship IPs are inching towards L3 now. So, that's all I had. Thank you. Thanks for providing me this opportunity. I'm ready to take the questions.
Perfect. I think that's a fantastic presentation, Kavita. It was really insightful in terms of how you evolved, a framework for quality engineering maturity. I see that TMMI probably should learn, from some of the practices that you have created within CGI. And I remember we had a conversation when you were at Wipro about TMMI and then like, how we can implement TMMI. And I really see that you continued with your vision and then like, you continued to implement that particular framework. And CGI has been quite progressive to implement that framework for within their projects. I'm just trying to look for some of the questions. I have a lot of questions personally, because I'm also a CMMI person. I've also been a framework person, but I'm just trying to see if there are any specific questions, people have had.
Sure.
Okay, so not many questions there, but I'll ask you a few questions just to keep it interesting and exciting. Now, the major challenge, obviously, with many of these frameworks is not about checking the implementation level, but they would also look at institutionalization of these practices, because we
Absolutely.
need to move from what I call as a compliance orientation to a performance orientation. And the performance orientation should have some form of a relation to the business indicators, and that's when people start seeing value in this. So, in the framework that you've created, how or what have been your experiences when you tried to institutionalize this as a common way of doing things? So
Yeah.
it would be
Yeah.
great to know that. Yeah.
Sure. So we started off this journey, or we formed a core team. We kind of took about almost 6 months to define and design this whole framework. Yeah, just putting levels and the parameters and attaching some weightage to it and things like that. That was pretty simple. But then, how is it really going to benefit? Unless until we have these KPIs or matrices as the measured outcomes, right? And that is a little challenging, I would say, in the initial phases, like because every project or every IP that we call, we're already, they were using various tools, heterogeneous tools, and different types of processes. I mean, there was still not, a complete, I would say, a standardized approach, right? When it
Mhm,
comes
mhm,
to, be it your CI/CD implementation or your agile implementation. So that was something which was very challenging, I would say. But then when we started defining and putting things in order or in terms of a document, and then we insisted on coming up with a test strategy document
mhm,
where every project, had to tell us like what are they going to do, like how are they going, what are the processes, and how are they going, their testing approach is all about.
mhm,
Some projects were still in waterfall, and some projects were still in, I would say, in agile. Okay, some were already inching to agile and quite matured enough, but some were still in waterfall. Okay, and that's where we felt, I mean, there is a need to have a master test strategy document in place, and then kind of fine tune the processes if there are any gaps. Okay, that has also become one of the line item in our entire quality engineering framework. And then we felt that when we started involving the business excellence team and making the I mean, we started this process as like, okay, your QE score is at stands today at 34% is our level 1, okay, and 72% is our level 3, and so on and so forth, or level 2, and so on and so forth. So when we came up with these numbers, it was a little kind of difficult to make them understand. And hey, I'm already doing agile, I'm already doing DevOps, and I've automated a lot of things, but
mhm.
why do you still insist that I'm still in level 2? I should already be in level 4.
Okay.
That was pretty much challenging. And then, as we started including more and more team members, the experts and the test managers, and we started having a weekly touch point call with all of these, who are actually taking up the assessments and things like that. Then it became very clear to them, and then they said, yes, as a business unit, we need to have a standardized approach and standardized processes. And then, we started this QE best practice sharing session every week. We still
Mhm.
continue to do that. It's been almost a year now. And
Okay.
that's when they felt, and to get the buy-in from the team was very much easier. And then they started, rolling it out to everybody. So it's kind of, they started this as a contest. Okay, I'm in level 2 and so on. So my
Okay.
percentage is at this level, and this, how do I move on? So that became kind of a very interesting thing for them, and they started, accepting it, I would
Nice.
say. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, that is actually true, because many a times when we implement frameworks, there is initially a stage of denial,
Yes.
at all levels, and they would believe that there is no best practice other than what they are doing as a best practice,
Yeah.
and then they would contest it.
That's it. Yeah.
So it's a great, interesting journey that I would say you must have gone through. Now,
Yes.
the second question I had is the sponsorship for all these initiatives is a very, very critical element. So
Absolutely.
if you were to ask the sponsors, as in when you started this journey, what was the sponsors' real ask, when they said we need a framework? Because a lot of
Yeah.
times sponsors tend to take business interest more importantly than the necessity to do something long term, right? Especially
Absolutely.
when you
Yeah.
talk to them about frameworks
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
mechanisms of trying to evaluate and see where we stand.
Mm-hmm.
They don't give you that kind of time and budget, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what was the real trigger at CGI where they said, hey, we need to do this long term? What was
Right.
their trigger, if I may say,
Yeah.
ask?
So to be honest, we started this just before the pandemic began last year. I think we got
Mhm.
together, we had the strategy meetings, and we started focusing on how do we really take our QE level to of take it to the next level, or how do we really start our journey and have measure them, on a benchmark them to the industry standards, right? So
Mhm.
that was the question lingering, and we started off with a big, I wouldn't say big bang, but then yes, people with similar interest, similar understanding, we formed a core team and we started off small. Um, I think within 9 months, it was pretty good shape. It was a pretty good shape. But then they felt, okay, I think now we've done everything. I think we really don't
Okay.
really need to focus on this much, right? But then again, the management, the leadership team started taking more interest because we started actually, projecting this or reporting it on a monthly basis.
Mhm.
And, so it definitely takes I would say a lot of effort and perseverance to keep
Mhm.
pushing that,
I-
this is the report card, this is where you stand, this is how you look, your product is at this stage of, internally, especially, of course. And
True.
we started, reporting it to our prime views, and the sponsors, and they felt, yes, we also initially felt this might fizz out after some time.
I
But
know.
then
Yeah.
the consistency and constantly, reporting and making sure this is where you
Informing.
are, this is where you need to improve. That is something which really helped, sustain this for so long, and now it has become a big initiative, I would say. And there definitely there is a buy-in from the leadership team, and they want to take it forward to the next, to other BUs. Interview planning is happening, and also probably
Brilliant.
we have something called as a management foundation framework, and this would also find a
Add
place
into
in
that.
that.
Okay.
Is something which we are looking forward to. Yeah.
No, no, brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah.
And did any of these findings or did any of these accomplishments translate into customer benefits? And did any of
Yes.
your customers acknowledge the efforts that you've put in?
Ye- Yes, so we do take the client satisfaction surveys, and then we have seen, and they have we are very clearly called out. We've seen this. You have started implementing a maturity assessment framework, and also the tools that we started evaluating and using. Especially when it comes to test data management or test coverage, all of that. There are some in-house developed tools, but we also looked at different tools in the market, and started implementing it and rolling it out to projects, which is indirectly has translated to very good client satisfaction scores. Yeah.
Perfect. No, no, that is absolutely great. And I think we certainly wish you all the success. And
Thank you.
I have a lot more questions. We'll probably connect separately, but I think we
Definitely.
certainly would like to see the next version of this framework become more public and more accepted
Yes.
as a common way of doing things. We
Definitely.
wish you all the success and really thank you, Kavitha, for sharing that wonderful insight and starting off our day two morning. I think that sets a tone for us saying that, like, hey, it's not about just transactionally executing stuff, but it's about looking at it from a strategic perspective and thinking about quality engineering as an organizational mechanism. And
Absolutely.
if you have to do continuous testing at scale, the one thing that is really essential is to have a framework of this nature, to kind of help you understand where you stand and where you are proceeding.
Thank
So really thank you, Kavitha. Really appreciate taking your time in the morning,
you. Sure.
and thanks a lot.